Well, good evening. It is so good to be with you here at Westside. Been looking forward to this for quite some time. And I don't mind the comparison between Nathan and me, but I just don't see it. We'll have students, we'll have church members confuse us all the time, but honestly, as was said a few moments ago, Nathan is one of my heroes when it comes to preaching, and he's been a fantastic older brother my entire life, so I always love to be compared to him. Picking up something else, maybe it's Lord here. I also want to say thank you on a personal note. Anytime I ask Nathan, Katie, or Grace about their work here, they always glow. They love you, and I know they're doing a good work for you, so thank you from a brother's perspective for all the work that all the love that you're showing them. What a great topic for this series, favorite sermons. I'm sure all the preachers are going to say this, but it's hard to pick just one favorite sermon. But when I think about what sermon I want to preach, I always try to think about what the greatest need is at the time. And as I talk to college students and adults and even young kiddos about what's on their mind, a lot of them right now are very confused. They want to know what their purpose is in life. They want to know about their identity. They want to know about where meaning is to be found. As my dad always says, whenever there's a need in the world, it's usually because we've neglected a certain part of our Bibles. I think the part of the Bible that we've neglected most recently have been the literature, the wisdom literature books of the Old Testament. And probably chief among those is Ecclesiastes. So tonight I want to focus our attention on meaning in life from the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, in case you didn't wake up this morning to a daily Bible reading from Ecclesiastes, let me remind you of how this book opens up. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. Thus saith the Lord, right? These are the encouraging words that you want to read early in the morning, right? Meaningless. In a sermon about where there is meaning in life, to hear Ecclesiastes say life is meaningless sounds like it's not very helpful, but for some of us, maybe even tonight, maybe that's where you're at. Maybe life doesn't seem to have all that much meaning. But the author goes on to say this, I, the teacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. I applied my mind to know, to explore, to study, wisdom, all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. There are some key words, some key phrases in this slide that you can see. Everything in this world, does it have meaning or not? The Ecclesiastes author is concerned about life here and now. There are a lot of other books in the Bible that are concerned about life hereafter, what happens after we die. But this book is focused on life under the sun, life under the heavens. Is there meaning right here and right now? Sometimes life seems like we're chasing after wind, like one minute we grab something, we think we've got the thing that we've been looking for, and then we look at our hands and it's gone. What do we do with that? We oftentimes pursue something else we think was going to satisfy us, it's going to give us what we want. And then when we grab that, it's gone as well before we know it. So where is meaning to be found after all this is said and done? In Egypt, we found this inscription, make holiday, don't weary of it. Look, there is no one allowed to take their things with them. There is no one who goes away who comes back again. When I think about walking through a graveyard and seeing this kind of inscription written by somebody, I wonder if what they're trying to say is, this is what I did and this is what I want you to do as well. I want you to go on a vacation and I want you to do it often. Maybe kind of like that old adage, you've never seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul. This idea that you can't take your things with you and so you need to use it right here and now. Is that what that person's trying to tell you that they did? They used everything that they had. They enjoyed life to the fullest. Or maybe it's a cautionary tale. Maybe it's a warning from somebody who had a lot stored up and never really used any of it. Maybe they never used any of their vacation days that they had collected. And so they're telling you as kind of their final warning, don't be like me. In fact, have you ever thought about what you're going to have on your tombstone? what you're going to say to those who are passing by? This book of Ecclesiastes is a cautionary tale from someone who's experienced a lot and has something to share with the rest. The book opens up with the introduction of the author as Kohelet. This roughly translated means the gatherer of the assembly. And depending on whether the assembly that's being gathered is a group of students who are trying to learn from this master teacher, or whether it's a worship assembly like tonight, we would call this master instructor a preacher. And so the lesson that he's trying to guide his students on, according to the ending of this book, is that he's trying to guide them, he's trying to instruct them on everything that they have learned, everything that they've experienced. He says to them, besides being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging many proverbs with great care. The preacher sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads and like nails firmly fixed. The collected sayings, they are given by one shepherd. The editor here says that what this author has done is he has gone through all of his library and looked at all of the wise sayings by all of the wise teachers, and he's put them all into one document, one book. I have an assignment for many of my students. I asked them to write down all the wise sayings that they've heard over the years. If tonight you started to write out all the wise sayings you've heard, you could probably fill a page pretty quickly, couldn't you? You know, like don't take wooden nickels, a penny saved is a penny earned, all of these wise instructions. I had a student contact me a few years ago saying that his document had become about 14 pages long, just writing out all the wise instructions. The book of Ecclesiastes is put together by someone who has gathered all of the wisest sayings from all around the world, put them into one document. And then he has culled through them to find the very best of the best. And he's even written some documents, some of these wise sayings for himself. So we're getting the best from this author. But who is this author? The author has introduced himself as a son of David who is king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says this preacher. There's only so many sons of David who are kings in Jerusalem. Maybe you have Solomon, maybe you have Adonijah, maybe you have Absalom, but there's a few other choices here if you go into his grandsons. So if you go into verse 16, he says, I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me. My heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. So who would be a son of David, who was king in Jerusalem, who had greater wisdom and knowledge than anyone else? And most people will conclude that has to be Solomon. Solomon has to be the wise teacher. Now, why would we listen to Solomon when it comes to this subject? Well, he was very wise, and he was also very worldly. Worldly in the sense of having seen the whole world, but also worldly in the sense of having sinned in all the ways that we can sin. And so he's able to instruct us from his experience in the world as to what we should and what we should not do. And so the question of Ecclesiastes that I want to zero in on is whether or not the world is filled with meaning. Does it have inherent meaning for our lives today? And this is a slightly different question than can you find meaning in life? After all, even those who don't believe in God can find a purpose for their life. They can find a way to pass their time. They can find a good job. They can find a good family. They can find something that is a sense of success for their life. But it's a different question to ask, does God put meaning in the world for us to find? Can you actually find a purpose that God has intended for you? And how do you know if that's the right purpose for you? I like this comic. You have a teacher who's saying you have life, birth, in between stuff, and then death. And a kid says, hey, is that it? Is that really all that there is to life? And I'll have to admit, growing up, sometimes that's what I thought about this world. I thought we come into this world, we kind of prove ourselves, we die, and then maybe there's another arrow after this, there's the afterlife. But the whole purpose of this life is to get to the afterlife. Well, there's plenty of books of the Bible that talk about that as a goal. But Ecclesiastes wants to raise the question, is there purpose in this life beyond just where we end up in the afterlife? There are three interpretations for understanding the book of Ecclesiastes, and each of these are valid understandings for the book. It all comes down to how we understand one word in the book, the word hevel. The first way to understand this is from the interpretation of the pessimist. Now, let's be honest, how many of us are pessimists? Raise your hand. Okay, hey. And all three of these are, by the way, valid interpretation, valid perspective. I see some people nudging other people. Yeah, you should raise your hand. No, it's fine to be a pessimist, right? And the pessimist is actually the predominant interpretation for this book. If you look at your own translations, you'll see words for hevel translated as vanity or meaningless, pointless, vain. If you pulled a commentary off the shelf, that is the interpretation you would find more often than not. And that's a valid interpretation because sometimes in our life, it seems pretty pessimistic. It seems very meaningless. In fact, I've guided some people through Ecclesiastes this very year using this very reading of Ecclesiastes to help them in their very life. But there are two other interpretations of Ecclesiastes that are equally helpful for our life. The second interpretation is called the realist perspective. How many of you would say that you're realists? Right? The cup is not half empty or half full. There's a cup and there's water in it, okay? Let's be real, right? So this is the realist perspective. We see the world the way that it is. And so for this interpretation, Michael Fox is kind of the grandfather of this interpretation. And he says that Ecclesiastes is filled with paradoxes. There's life, but then there's death. There's good, but then there's evil. There's justice, but there's injustice. It's hard to make sense out of this world. Which one is it? The world is inconsistent. But the good news, according to Ecclesiastes, is that God is consistent. We can trust in God. And if we put our hope in God, everything will make sense because He'll never let us down. That's a valid interpretation, a very helpful interpretation of Ecclesiastes. But there's a third one that's not often read, and this, I believe, is the one that we need for tonight. It's the optimist perspective. How many of you are optimists in here? All right, you're waiting for me to get to you. You're saying, this is an opportunity for me to be able to do something. The optimist perspective is popularized by a man named James Limburg. He's written this fantastic book called Encountering Ecclesiastes, a book for our time. I encountered this book in graduate school, and it changed my life. It made Ecclesiastes one of my favorite books in the entire Bible. And you can use this book for a Bible class, for a small group, for your own individual study. And it makes a book that's often intimidating very approachable. Limburg says that as we understand hevel, it just means that life is short, it's fleeting. It passes us by, and so we need to take advantage of every moment as a gift from God. And that's the reading that I want to take us through tonight as we think about the overall theme of this book, which I would argue is carpe diem, seize the day, appreciate every moment. The author, the preacher, the teacher guides the reader, the audience, through four different topics. The first of which is wisdom. What is the value of wisdom in this world? In Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 16, he says, I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is but a striving after the wind. But in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. Do you feel like that sometimes? Do you feel like you've studied something, but then you easily forget it? You've gained all this knowledge, but where has it gone? We're told that we remember about 10% of what we learned. And so it might be discouraging to learn anything, because you're just going to forget it. Sometimes when you study a subject, you just realize what you don't know after studying what you have learned. And so it can be confusing, it can be frustrating to study something only to realize there's so much more out there that you need to study afterward. And sometimes when you study something, when you read something, when you hear something, it causes you to be frustrated or dissatisfied with this world. So it might be better to just remain ignorant, to not learn anything. Maybe that's the escape from this dreaded fate of forgetting. But that's not where Kohelet ends. He doesn't see this as a meaningless task. In chapter 9, he says this about wisdom and folly. He says in verse 13, I have also seen this example of wisdom under the sun, and it seemed great to me. There was a little city with a few men in it, and a great king came against it and besieged it, building great siege works against it. But there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet no one remembered that poor man. But I say that wisdom is better than might, though the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. So there was a city that was about to be destroyed by a great king, but there was a wise man inside who came up with a strategy to save the entire city. Now, did anyone praise him for it? Did they build any kind of monument to honor him? No, of course not. Why? Simply because he was poor, and people don't tend to honor those who are poor. But does that mean that his wisdom, his contribution was pointless? No. His wisdom saved the entire city. So what if we can't know everything? Maybe it's the thing that we know that's going to save somebody's life. Maybe you don't know as much as somebody else knows, but maybe the knowledge that you have at the right time is going to lead someone closer to the Lord. Just because we can't know everything doesn't mean that the knowledge that we have can't be meaningful for the moment. The second topic that he explores is the topic of fun. He says in chapter 2, verse 10, "Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil." Whatever he wanted, he got. And this was my reward for all of my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil that I expended in doing it. And behold, all was hevel, or vanity, a striving after the wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. He says, I did everything I wanted, and it was meaningless, it seems. Hevel, fleeting, passing. Some of you just got back from vacation. Others of you are planning for a vacation maybe later this summer. As you're thinking about that trip, you know how all trips tend to go, right? You make all these plans, you get in the car, and maybe something goes wrong with the car. Or maybe the car is okay, but as you're starting down the road, you're not feeling well, the kids aren't feeling well, things aren't going as you planned. You get to your destination, you have these huge expectations of what it's going to be like, and it's not the way that it's expected to be. Maybe you spend more than you planned to spend. You come back, and you're tired. You need a vacation from your vacation. You need a way to recover, and so you think, was it even worth it? Should we go on another vacation? Others of you go on a vacation with maybe lower expectations. Everything turns out as you expected, if not better. And you say, I just want to stay on vacation. This was so great. I want to go on vacation every day. Vacation, fun, entertainment. It's good, but it's fleeting. It doesn't last forever. And so what should we do? Should we stop enjoying vacation? Should we stop enjoying fun? Should we go on vacation every single day? That's not where Kohelet ends up. In chapter 3, he says, I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all of his toil. This is God's gift to man. A few weeks ago, when the semester was still going on, we got an email from the director of online teaching saying that there was going to be a meeting for all of those who teach online. And you could hear the groaning through the email, right? Nobody wanted to go to a meeting. But then he said, did I mention that Zaxby's will be catering? Suddenly everybody wants to be an online teacher, right? Who doesn't like free food? It's so amazing how something so simple as a little bit of food with the right kind of people at the right time can make it a wonderful day. I don't know what your plans are after service tonight. Maybe you have a routine. Maybe you need to keep that routine. But what if you changed your routine tonight? What if tonight you just went and got some ice cream with some friends? Maybe your kids, maybe your grandkids. Maybe you just went and just enjoyed some coffee. Maybe you watched an extra show. Maybe you enjoyed a longer movie. Maybe you enjoy the fun that's available from God tonight while it's still available. It may be fleeting, but that doesn't mean it can't be enjoyed as a gift from God. The third topic that he explores is the topic of work. He says in chapter 2, verse 18, I hated all my toil. in which I toiled under the sun. Has anyone said that? Maybe even today. I hate my toil, hate my work, I hate my job, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he'll be wise or whether he'll be a fool. You spend all this time making all this money, and one day you'll die, and the money's going to go to who? Maybe you know, maybe you've already determined who that's going to be, but can you guarantee it's going to go to that person? Do you even know how that person or those people are going to use the money that you've worked for? And so the conclusion might be, I work all these hours to make all this money, and so I don't know where it's going to go. Maybe I should stop working. Maybe I should stop saving. That's one conclusion, but that's not where Kohelet concludes. He says in chapter 2, verses 24 through 26, there is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from God, who can eat and who can have enjoyment? I've underlined that 3 times in my Bible. Apart from God, who can eat and who can find enjoyment? For to the one who pleases God, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting. Now, you won't find that in many verses of the Bible, that it's for the fool to store up excess. Instead, here it says that it is the fool who does this only to give to the one who pleases God. The one who saves their money is going to give their money to the one who knows how to spend it rightfully on the things that God has given to them. Some of you really enjoy your work. You have a job where you're able to use your gifts and your talents. You find meaning in the people that you're able to reach, the people that you're able to help. Some of you may not like your job, but you like the money that you get from your job, and you can use that money to do the things that help others, that help yourself. There's a way to find meaning and purpose in your work or through your work. The 4th topic that he explores is the topic, you can get it here. I think I've lost it. Can we advance the slide to the next topic, please? Well, it's the topic of wealth. Chapter 5, verse 10. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. Have you ever heard someone say, I get paid too much? Or someone say, I get paid exactly what I'm worth. No one has ever said that, right? Everyone wants more. They think they deserve more. And so what should we say? Because I can't get paid what I'm worth, because I can't get paid as much as I think I deserve, I should not work, I should not accumulate any wealth? That's not where Kohelet concludes. He says in verse 18, Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment, and all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given him. For this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, this is the gift of God. For he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. It's also a verse I've underlined 3 times in my Bible. You're probably already thinking of somebody like this, someone who you may not even know how old they are, because they don't act their age. In a good way, they enjoy every moment of every day. God occupies them with the joy of their heart, and they don't much think about their time. When I first moved to Kentucky to pursue my doctorate, I met my neighbor. His name was Mr. House. That was actually his last name. And when I met him, he greeted me by saying, I see that you have children, and I want to warn you that you shouldn't have your children walk past my house late at night, because I might accidentally shoot them. So, well, we're not going to be hanging out with you very much anyway. He said, there are some people who are in our neighborhood, and I think that they're trying to steal my clock collection. I've traveled the world. I've been in various world conflicts, and so I've collected different things. I've got some clocks. I've got some guns, and I'm worried people are trying to steal. I also have a shotgun pointed at my back door, and I have a rope tied around it to the door. So if anyone comes through my back door, they'll wish they hadn't. This is someone I'm not going to spend a lot of time with. But he said, I'm very concerned about my things. Well, 3 years into living there, he had a heart attack, and an ambulance pulled up and took him to the hospital. Just a few hours later, his kids came to his house, and I went over to see how Mr. House was doing. And they said, it doesn't look good. They don't expect him to make it through the night. We live out of town, and so we were getting his affairs in order. There are some items that we can't do anything with, probably trash. If there's anything that reminds you of him, it's by the side of the road, you can take it. Well, I saw an easel, and I thought my kids would enjoy playing with that easel, so I took it and put it in our garage. Few days passed, and the cars left. And then Mr. House returned home to an empty house. Come to find out, he wasn't on good terms with his kids. And so when they heard that he was in the hospital, they thought this would be a good opportunity to go and take their inheritance. They cleaned him out of everything. Mr. House said, didn't you see this? Why didn't you do anything? I said, I had no idea. I'll learn next time. Hey, you want your easel back? Here. I said, what are you going to do? And he said, well, I'm going to sue them, and I'm going to get all of my clocks back, all of my guns back, and the $60,000 that they cleaned out of my bank account. And so he did. He got about $40,000 back. He got some of the guns back. He got some of the clocks back. I said, now what are you going to do? So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to marry the first woman I see, and her kids are going to get my stuff instead. That's exactly what he did. She moved in just about a week later. About 6 weeks later, Mr. House dies of a heart attack. Her boyfriend moves in. It's a very weird situation. And we really didn't go over to that house after that. This was the lesson I took away. Mr. House had all of these possessions, all of these clocks, all of these guns, and I never saw him show any of those clocks to anybody. I never saw him shoot any of those guns. Maybe it's good I didn't see him shoot any of those guns, but he never really enjoyed any of his possessions. And to make things worse, whenever I talked to him about God, he wasn't on good terms with God. He blamed God for the passing of his wife and for all of his injuries and war. And so he really didn't have much hope. Not much hope in this life, and not much hope in the afterlife. I think, like Mr. House, Ecclesiastes is this cautionary tale. In chapter 12, it says, remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come, before those days draw near in which you say, I no longer have pleasure in them. What it's talking about is when we get older, when things change, when we lose those things that we had before, we no longer have the same opportunities to enjoy life as we once had. Ecclesiastes basically gives us 3 opportunities. One opportunity, when we see the fleeting nature of life, is to try to chase after more of it, to try to live longer, to try to look younger. In fact, there was another man in Kentucky. He was in charge of all the railroads, and he had cancer. He paid his doctors $1 million for every year they could keep him alive. They tried their best. They kept him alive as long as they could. But at some point, he died. We could spend our lives chasing after more of something that's limited. Or we can look back at what we regret, the things that we never did, and want to go back and change something that we can't possibly change. Or we can enjoy the moment that God has given to us. We can seize today, which is all we have control over. This also tells you what kind of God you believe in. A God who's only a God of a future, a place somewhere distant, or he's the God of the past, who may be judging us for things that we never did. Could he also be the God of today, the God of the present, the God who has gifted you with something right here and right now? I hope that you'll go out and seize the day. I hope you won't be like Mr. House. I hope you'll find meaning right now, right here. If we could help you in any way, won't you come as together we stand and sing?